This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Turkey launches a military operation in northeastern Syria after U.S. troop withdrawal. Tunisia's detained presidential candidate Nabil Karoui to be released ahead of Sunday's runoff election. And British members of parliament to hold a special Saturday sitting to discuss a deal over Brexit. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. The details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Zimbabwe increases electricity prices by more than 300%. And the Chinese negotiation team is in Washington, ahead of the start of trade talks with the US on Thursday. We'll have the details on those stories coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And let's start off in the Middle East. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkey has launched Operation Peace Spring in northeastern Syria. The incursion comes following a sudden policy change by the United States that withdrew its troops from the region, leaving the Syrian Kurdish militia there vulnerable. Ankara says the militants are linked with the Kurdistan Workers' Party that has been waging an insurgency against the Turkish government since 1984. Turkey says Operation Peace Spring aims to prevent Kurdish militants from using a terror corridor at the border and also to create a safe zone for Syrian refugees. Meanwhile, Iran has urged Turkey to avoid military action in Syria. President Hassan Rouhani said Ankara has every right to be concerned about the security of its southern borders, but called on the country to show restraint. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the Kurds are extremely alarmed by U.S. statements and that U.S. policies in Syria could, quote, ignite the whole region. Now, British members of parliament will be called to parliament for a special Saturday sitting on the 19th of October after a European leaders summit seen as the last chance to thrash out a deal with Westminster over Brexit. It's thought a range of options might be considered, particularly if a deal with Brussels cannot be agreed upon. Meanwhile, negotiations continue, but they have been marred by the recent explosive exchanges from London and Europe in recent days.
Much of today is being spent with both sides climbing down from that explosion of bad language yesterday, comments that were at times undiplomatic and certainly pretty damaging coming from both sides on Twitter and being leaked and also being gossiped into the public arena. So today, Boris Johnson resumed trying to negotiate his deal through Brussels in time to meet the deadline, shrugging off comments from yesterday that the German government says it's pretty much impossible and that the Irish government had betrayed the UK by agreeing in private but publicly turning down their support for the deal. There has been some fallout, however. Comments yesterday that the UK might withdraw security support for some EU member states and also that the government intended to campaign on a no-deal ticket has upset some ministers. And today a newspaper has published a list of 5 cabinet ministers it now calls potential resignations down the line. What bothers people is that most of the leaks coming from Downing Street yesterday seem to happen without the Prime Minister's knowledge, and that suggests that Boris Johnson does not have a tight enough grip on his close team of advisers at the heart of government. Meanwhile, a Scottish court continues to deliberate on whether or not it can sign an extension request to the European Union if the government refuses to do so. Clearly, the judiciary are staying away from the politics as much as they can until they really have to step in. Meanwhile, the assumption on both sides really is that an extension will go ahead. And that was assumed to be up until January next year. But there's now open talk in Brussels that it might go all the way until June. There's nothing on the European Union calendar that an angry delegation like the UK could spoil with its veto before June. So that would be a safe bet as far as the Brussels diplomats are concerned, and indeed they might even get it. We could still find the UK inside the European Union in June next year.
In about an hour from now, Tunisia's electoral body is expected to release the results of Sunday's parliamentary election. The vote was the third since the uprising. Up to 15,000 candidates were competing for the 217 seats. Exit polls put the Ennahda party in the lead, followed by the Heart of Tunisia party of detained media mogul Nabil Karoui. The party that wins most seats has the right to nominate a prime minister, the most powerful person in Tunisia's system of government. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi is standing by for us for that announcement of the final results of the Tunisian parliamentary elections. He's joining us on the phone now from Tunis. Adnan, when are the final numbers, though, coming out? And could you tell us a bit about the preliminary results so far?
The preliminary results show that Ennahda Islamic Party could lead the legislative elections, followed by the party of the media mogul Nabil Karoui, Qalb Tunis. But the Council of the Election Authority has held a meeting to review the impacts of some violations on the election process, particularly the distribution of seats in the parliament in accordance with the regulations of Article 143 of the election law, which allows the cancellation, even partially, of some lists. So there could be a change in the distribution of seats on the basis of the strongest remains in case the violations did really take place in some polling stations, especially that the gap between some lists does not exceed 50 votes. We will have another Islamic movement followed by Qalb Tunis, but for the rest, we are still waiting for the decision of the election authority.
Well, Adnan, give us a brief understanding of what happens next after the results are announced.
After the results are announced, all parties will have to form the ruling party, the new ruling parties, or the winning parties, or the winning party will have to form the new government. I have mentioned more than one winning party because another Islamic movement, if it wins the elections in 1 hour, it cannot rule on its own because it does not have the majority of 109 MPs and 109 seats at parliament. So it will need the backup, the support of other parties, probably the third or the fifth in this election, because Nabil Karoui, the media mogul, said that his party will not form a government with another Islamic movement. So the main challenge will be to form this government, and this process will certainly be very long and hard because the parties will have to make concessions and look for some ministerial positions to accept to vote or to be part of the next parliament, the next government.
Well, Adnan, we also know, though, that the presidential runoff election is set for Sunday. What is the word on the detained candidate Nabil Karoui?
The court of Tunis has just announced that Nabil Karoui will be released in less than 2 hours. Maybe he will be released during the official announcement of the elections here in Tunis. So the judiciary system, the court and the judge took this decision, and this will certainly have an impact on the ongoing campaign of Nabil Karoui. Nabil Karoui said that he will not talk and will not address the media as long as he's in jail. But right now, thousands of his supporters and his newly elected MPs have gathered near the main prison in the suburbs of the capital city, Tunis, in the region of Mordagia, waiting for his official release. So we are waiting for a short but a very challenging presidential campaign in the next few days before the Sunday poll between Nabil Karoui and the second candidate, the constitutional law expert, Qais Said.
Adnan Chauchi joining us there from Tunis on the elections in Tunisia. Well, a presidential runoff is taking place on Sunday in Tunisia. The two contenders are seen as political outsiders. Here's CGTN's Brian Toussaint with more on the candidates.
Tunisians are bracing for a presidential election runoff that is expected to take place on October 13th. The two candidates expected to battle it out are viewed as political outsiders. One is in a jail cell, while the other is a retired law professor. The two are both independent candidates with diverse political ideologies. Media mogul Nabil Karoui was detained on tax evasion and money laundering charges, but he has been denying these accusations. Despite being behind bars, he has managed to galvanize his supporters, managing to beat established parties at the ballot and emerge as one of the two lead contenders. Retired law professor Kais Said is a man with conservative ideologies. He is backed by the moderate Ennahda Islamist Party, which enjoyed majority seats in the last parliament. Said recently halted campaigns ahead of the polls, arguing that he seeks to create a level playing ground for his political rival, who is currently in prison awaiting a hearing.
I am an independent candidate and I shall remain an independent candidate. I do not belong to any political party, and whoever would like to join my cause, I thank them. Whoever chooses a different path, I thank them as well. But the final word is with the Tunisian people.
On his part, Nabil has been promising to put up a strong battle.
We are committed to entering the battle strongly. Our strength lies in our reformist programs and the strength of will.
Tunisia goes to this round of presidential polls with harsh economic times hitting hard. So far, unemployment stands at 15%, with some cities recording up to 30% unemployment rates. It is a situation that ranks higher than it was before the 2011 revolution. The recent boat accident in the Mediterranean, where a majority of the victims were Tunisians, has also jolted the nation and region. The North American nation is seen as the most progressive in the Arab world. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. 3 scientists split the Nobel Prize for Chemistry as 2 astronomers and a cosmologist share the prize for physics. And Ethiopia's Prime Minister is seen as a real contender for the Nobel Peace Prize.
The newly upgraded CGTN website offers optimized coverage of China and international affairs, as well as distinct voices from around the globe. Be the first to know the biggest political news and discover the background to the major decisions. Decode China with a different perspective and get a better understanding of how China sees the world. Go beyond the news with sharp opinions on the events shaping today's world and reveal a China you have never seen before. Listen to entrepreneurs for in-depth analysis of the economy and touch the pulse of new technology via our hands-on videos. Travel back in time with CGTN to learn about China's past and immerse yourself in Chinese culture to discover the stories behind Kung Fu. Get the latest news on Chinese lifestyle, including travel, sports, and nature. Regular productions including Ask China put high-ranking officials on the spot, while C-Lab presents new ways of storytelling via cutting-edge technologies, and Global Stringer delivers unique videos from China and beyond. Take a look at the world from a different angle. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan in Beijing. President Xi hailed their country's strong friendship and said they would remain close even if there was a change in regional or international situations. The Pakistani leader congratulated the People's Republic of China on its 70th anniversary last week and said he looked forward to deepening cooperation under the China-led Belt and Road Initiative. Khan went on to praise Beijing for taking what he called a fair stance on the Kashmir dispute between Pakistan and India. Chinese President Xi Jinping has also met with the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, Manasseh Sogavare. The countries established diplomatic ties last month. President Xi said the Solomon Islands' recognition of the One China principle, the foundation stone of Beijing's Taiwan policy, would benefit the Pacific island nation going forward. He said due to its location, the Solomon Islands could play a strategic role in the 21st century maritime Silk Road or the sea route of the China-led Belt and Road Initiative. President Xi also recognized the greater number of Chinese tourists visiting the country. Sogavare congratulated the People's Republic of China on its 70th anniversary last week and said his country wanted to boost cooperation in areas such as trade, investment, fisheries and tourism. To South Africa now, where a new cancer-fighting machine has been installed in a government hospital. It will allow doctors to treat more than 3,000 oncology patients a year. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the report.
For many cancer patients, undergoing radiotherapy treatment can be a lifesaver, but it's often time-consuming and onerous, which is especially the case in a public facility. But that may change, because Cape Town's Groote Hospital now has a new weapon in their arsenal in the fight against cancer. The new Line-Neck radiotherapy machine will allow them to treat up to 40 patients a day, which is 4 times faster than standard treatments.
It will make an important contribution for 2 reasons. The one is that it's very quick, so we can put a lot of patients onto the machine and treat them very quickly. But the second one is that we can afford it. We can fit it into an old cobalt bunker and put a machine where we couldn't have put a machine before.
The machine then is certainly high-tech, which resembles a CT scanner and makes virtually no noise at all. It also takes just 6 minutes to treat a patient. That gives the hospital a big boost in treating breast and prostate cancers, which are 2 of the most common cancers found in men and women in South Africa. But its benefits don't stop there.
This gives us the opportunity to then visualize soft tissues. So you can see the actual prostate, for example, instead of just the bones around the prostate. And this is what allows us to match to soft tissue so that we know we are treating the actual target and not just in the vicinity of the target.
The Line-Neck machine is certainly a welcomed addition. And for the few patients who have received the treatment so far, it's certainly a far cry from its predecessors.
Patient comfort on this unit is, I don't know how to say it, spectacular compared to where we've worked on our other units. Our other units are amazing, but this thing literally tops everything. Our patients get on the bed. By the time we're outside the room and we come in, they're like, are we done? Are we done? And I must say it is amazing.
The machine also offers great potential for the future in research and development as well, including the possibility of adaptive planning and artificial intelligence. But for now, it's being put to good use in this important public health battle. Every other number of cancer patients who seek treatment at this hospital increased by between 5 and 10%. So the Line-Neck machine is not only proving critical to those who need therapy now, but to the ill patients who will desperately need it in the future. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Tunisia and China have agreed to conduct a feasibility study to extend a new hospital in the region of Tina, Governorate of Fax. It will be operational from the 3rd of November next year, working with Chinese funding estimated at $70 million. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi reports.
Tunisian Premier Youssef Achahed announced that the start of the extension work of this new hospital is planned at the end of the second half of 2020.
The new and modern hospital sections will provide medical assistance to people who need it. I want to thank our Chinese friends for this important donation. I hope to see the cooperation relations between Tunisia and China expand to other areas.
The agreement was signed by the Tunisian Health Minister Sonia Bashir and China's ambassador to Tunisia, Wang Guanbing.
We wish to boost this partnership with the Ministry of Health in Tunisia and the Governorate of Sfax to open the hospital as soon as possible. The hospital will meet the needs of the local population and other regions across Tunisia.
The new hospital will include a surgical center and a large traumatology and burn center. Tunisian and Chinese doctors and engineers will work together until the hospital is operational.
The new hospital will be an integrated healthcare center where all services and specialties will be available. It will be the most modern hospital in Tunisia.
Tunisian Premier Youssef Achahed said that during his visit to China in September 2018, on the occasion of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum, The Chinese authorities pledged to equip the Sinasfax hospital with advanced equipment and to expand it. Authorities say the Chinese donation for the construction of a new hospital in the city of Sfax, the beating heart of the Tunisian economy, shows the strong cooperation between Tunis and Beijing. This partnership has been strengthened in recent years. It reinforced the friendly ties between the peoples of the two countries. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, when it comes to conservation, China has in recent years become Africa's largest and most important conservation partner. CGTN's Robert Nagila brings us more on how China ensures that wildlife thrives by providing financial and technical support to various African countries.
Arguably, one of China's biggest sports personalities, retired professional basketball player Yao Ming, is just as big on animal conservation.
If there's no demand, poacher would be not necessary.
Ming's conservation efforts amplify that of his country, China. In recent years, China has stepped up its conservation efforts through biodiversity. Over the past 4 years, the country, in collaboration with the African Wildlife Foundation, has provided support and technical know-how to governments and institutions to ensure conservation is part of economic development.
A big part of our work on the continent lies in 3 areas on wildlife. We stop the killing of wildlife with a number of projects on the field. We do stop the trafficking of wildlife across the continent, but also we stop the demand. So the engagement of China lies on those 3 areas.
So much so that China is now one of Africa's largest conservation partners, promoting sustainable development in line with achieving the African Union's Agenda 2063.
China is becoming very, very important to our mission.
Experts say Africa can learn from China's past experiences. Take Shanghai, for example. Despite having world-class infrastructure, the city has poured millions of dollars to develop its ecological surroundings. On weekends and holidays, thousands of visitors pour into the Shanghai Zoo, home to more than 6,000 animals, from the giant panda to different species of butterflies. Over 100,000 trees with nearly 600 plant species are planted here.
They've cut down more than 50% of pollution from coal. How have they done it so quickly? What policies have they adopted? How have they involved the private sector? What measures have they taken? So there are lessons, because China is doing right now a very, very good job in cleaning up. They've reforested a lot of the areas that were affected by deforestation in China.
And the country has led by example. In 2017, China shut down its domestic ivory market and banned commercial processing of rhino horns and tiger bones. It's also tightened legislation on trade in endangered fauna and flora. To date, it continues to provide funds, equipment, manpower and technology to support African countries in the conservation of endangered species and habitats. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The 2019 Nobel Prize are being officially announced this week in Sweden. On Wednesday, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was jointly awarded to 3 scientists for their work developing lithium-ion batteries. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
3 scientists will share the 2019 Nobel Prize for Chemistry for their work on the development of lithium-ion batteries. Today, these portable, rechargeable batteries are used in everything from mobile phones to laptops and electric vehicles.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2019 Nobel Prize in Chemistry jointly to John B. Goodenough, M. Stanley Whittingham, and Akira Yoshino for the development of lithium-ion batteries.
The Nobel Prize Committee praised their work for laying the foundation of a wireless, fossil fuel-free society. Following the announcement, Japanese winner Akira Yoshino joined in over the phone.
One of our greatest challenges in our time is climate change. And I wonder what you think about your research and actually what you hope that your research with your batteries will lead to when it comes to our future and climate change.
Yeah. I think that climate change is a very serious issue for humankind, and lithium-ion batteries can store the electricity.
The Nobel Prize comes with a cash award of just over $900,000 US. A gold medal and a diploma will be conferred on the 10th of December, the anniversary of founder Alfred Nobel's death in 1896. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the Nobel Prize for Physics has also been split between recipients. The cosmologist James Peebles takes home half the prize for his work on exploring the structure of the universe. Developed over 2 decades, his theoretical framework serves as the foundation for how scientists today understand the history of the universe, going all the way back to the Big Bang. 2 astronomers, Michel Maire and Didier Queloz, share the other half of the prize for their 1995 discovery of the first exoplanet. This is a planet outside our solar system that orbits a star like the Sun. The discovery of 51 Pegasi b came from their research into unknown worlds in the Milky Way.
It's a very old dream of the humanity. Already more than 2,000 years ago, Greek philosopher was discussing the fact that we have other worlds in the universe, and maybe some of them could be inhabited. So at the present time, for most of the people, they are looking for the next step.
And I think we're moving for detecting small planets and possible planets having life, and that's not that far away. So that's one of my main interests right now, and I hope to be able to spend time on that, and I will certainly maybe spend a bit more time to promote science as a whole.
And the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize winner will be announced on a Friday. As the world awaits the winner, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is emerging as one of the top favorites to win the coveted prize. CGTN's Laura Walubengo takes us through Abiy Ahmed's peace milestones.
Between May 1998 and June 2000, Ethiopia and Eritrea fought a bitter border war. A war that killed over 70,000 people, wounded and displaced even more. A peace deal that was signed in the year 2000 failed to hold, and for almost 20 years, these two nations were technically at war. But in 2018, then newly appointed Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made an historic arrival into Asmara, the Eritrean capital. A meeting between him and Eritrean President Isaias Afewerki still remains as Abiy Ahmed's biggest moment in his short stint as Prime Minister.
When there is peace between the Ethiopian and Eritrean people, the Horn of Africa region will become a region of peace and development.
Abiy Ahmed and reforms seem to be the two names that create a rhyme of sorts in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa region. No wonder he is being seen as a favorite contender for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize.
The situation between the two countries ran into a deadlock, so it needed that courage somehow to change the situation, and that's really what happened. And credit goes to the Prime Minister for doing that.
The Prime Minister has also overseen reforms in his nation, which have seen a woman rise to the presidency. Political prisoners have also been released and a ban on political groups lifted. In Ethiopia, Abiy is immensely popular with the youth thanks to his government's creation of freedom of expression.
He has released people who have been forgotten in prisons for ages, absolutely forgotten. This is a major deed for any good Ethiopian. I am an Ethiopian born and raised here, but I have never seen a leader like him in our country in my entire life.
I will be happy if Dr. Abiy wins the Nobel Peace Prize, and I believe he deserves it. If he wins, it will encourage him to do much better things in the future for Ethiopia.
Abiy also played a big role in easing tensions that followed the ouster of President Omar al-Bashir in Sudan. But the reliance on his charisma as opposed to building institutions could be playing against him in some way.
A year ago, there was nothing else but this kind of relying on these charismatic political resources, because there was ideological crisis and the ruling party was deeply divided, so he could not really rely on the party structure. So in that sense, a charismatic personal rule had its own pacifying role, but I think we have reached a level where this is no longer fit for the purpose. There must be some kind of concrete policies which deal with the structural problems and challenges.
Abiy has survived an assassination attempt, a coup attempt in Amhara state, and rising tensions in various states that have been calling for more representation. However, the young Swedish climate change activist Greta Thunberg remains the top favorite for the Nobel Peace Prize. Based on his solid achievements at home and in the region, Ethiopians are hoping that Abiy Ahmed brings home the country's first Nobel Peace Prize. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, let's now take a look at matters business. Here's Ramanyang. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Zimbabwe increases the price of electricity by more than 300%. And China's negotiation team has arrived in Washington ahead of Thursday's trade talks with the United States.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Right, then let's start the segment in Zimbabwe. Average power prices today went up by an eye-watering number, over 300%. This is all part of efforts to ramp up electricity production and improve supplies as well. Now, the steep increase is a second power price hike for Zimbabwean citizens and companies in 3 months. The sector regulator approved the tariff hike in part due to an increase in inflation. It also argues that the higher prices will ensure that there are sufficient funds coming through that are raised for the maintenance of the national grid and also to pay for imports. Those are estimated to cost nearly $20 million a month. Now, the country's economy is forecast to contract by up to 6% this year alone. The contraction is due to the devastating drought and power cuts that often last for 18 hours. They've crippled businesses, industries and homes. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa and Uganda's President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni have agreed to form a joint commission to fast-track investments between the two countries. CGTN's Isabel Nakeria filed this report.
The Zimbabwe leader is in Uganda to explore opportunities for future investments. President Emmerson Mnangagwa and his Ugandan counterpart Yoweri Museveni have agreed to convene an investment forum for both countries to share business opportunities.
We are determined because we receive the support of our brothers and sisters on the entire continent. Member states of the AU support us in the course we are taking. And we believe that with the support, diplomatic and material support we receive from our senior presidents like President Museveni, we shall succeed.
Zimbabwe is going through an economic crisis with high inflation rates leading to the spiraling cost of living. President Mnangagwa concedes his country is not doing well due to sanctions imposed on it by the US and EU powers.
The sanctions against Zimbabwe were imposed when Robert Mugabe was still president. The restrictions have had a devastating impact on ordinary citizens who now can't afford basic supplies like food, water or gas.
Zimbabwe is unable to get funding from international financial institutions like the World Bank or IMF.
Currently, it is true, Zimbabwe has survived up to date because we are focused on our own domestic resources For the last 20 years, we have never received lines of credit. Whatever we have in Zimbabwe is on the basis of our own domestic resources, plus both political and material support from our sister countries on the continent.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says President Mnangagwa's visit will deepen ties and improve trade between the two countries.
This brotherhood, this solidarity, come and visit me, let me visit you, is both protocol but also business. Because when you visit, you see, you learn, then you know how to take advantage of the relationship.
The Southern African countries have already called on the US and EU to lift sanctions against Zimbabwe for the economy to pick up. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Entebbe, Uganda.
Our delegation led by China's top trade negotiator and Vice Premier Liu He has arrived in Washington ahead of the resumption of trade talks on the 10th of October. That last round concluded more than 2 months ago. Just before this week's talks, the United States government blacklisted 28 Chinese companies, citing human rights infringement, and some experts are arguing that this could cloud talks this week. All of this is happening before another interesting deadline, the 15th of October. On that date, some tariffs on some imports from China will rise to 30%. CGTN's Liu Yang has the details.
New awkward tactics from the Trump administration, with the aim of further pressuring China in order to obtain more from the new round of negotiations scheduled to take place on Thursday in Washington. On Monday, Washington blacklisted 28 Chinese entities, including some of China's top video surveillance and facial recognition firms. Technology, the U.S. says, is being used to repress China's Muslim minority groups. This is the same blacklisting process used to punish Huawei earlier this year. The additions consist of 20 Chinese public security bureaus in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, as well as 8 companies, including video surveillance provider Hikvision and AI startup SenseTime. The U.S. Commerce Department says it targeted bureaus and companies for their involvement in alleged mistreatment of minorities in Xinjiang. The action bars the firms from buying components from U.S. companies without U.S. governmental approval, similar with what Washington has done to Huawei. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded on Tuesday.
Xinjiang does not have a so-called human rights issues. What the U.S. is doing is to interfere in China's internal affairs. The counterterrorism measures in Xinjiang are to prevent terrorism crimes. The measures meet Chinese and international law and are supported by 25 million Xinjiang residents.
Companies are also making their voices heard. Video surveillance maker Hikvision strongly opposes the decision, adding that punishing the company will only negatively impact the U.S. Alibaba-backed SenseTime is deeply disappointed by the move, saying they follow all relevant laws where they operate and that they've developed an AI code of ethics to ensure proper usage of their products. And iFlatTech, known for its voice recognition software, said they had already anticipated the ban and that it wouldn't affect daily operations. Also on Tuesday night, the Ministry of Commerce strongly urged the U.S. to immediately stop making irresponsible remarks on Xinjiang, stop interfering in China's internal affairs, and to move relevant Chinese entities out of the list. The ministry says it will also take all necessary measures to resolutely safeguard its own interests. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, the new head of the International Monetary Fund says that the fallout from the current trade battles we're seeing around the world could last for up to an entire generation. Kristalina Georgieva issued the warning in her inaugural speech. CGTN's Owen Fairclough has the details.
When your new job entails overseeing a global economy heading for danger, maybe there's not much time for blue sky thinking.
We have spoken in the past about the dangers of trade disputes. Now we see that they are actually taking a toll.
Kristalina Georgieva's sobering assessment was her first public address as head of the International Monetary Fund. The second woman to run the IMF after Christine Lagarde left to head the European Central Bank, Georgieva grew up in Bulgaria during the Cold War and sees familiar divisions now.
The current drifts could lead to changes that last for a generation. Broken supply chains, siloed trade sectors, a digital Berlin Wall that forces countries to choose between technological systems.
And the cost of these trade conflicts waged by the Trump administration has been priced beyond lower growth for individual countries.
For the global economy, the cumulative losses of trade conflicts could get us to about $700 billion by 2020.
The IMF says a major international coordinated stimulus program will be needed should the world economy slow down more sharply than forecast. And that was last done by G20 leaders 10 years ago, after the near collapse of Wall Street almost brought down the entire global financial system. Owen Fairclough, CGTN.
Let's focus on the world of cryptocurrencies. A UN agency, UNICEF, has announced that it's now accepting and dispersing donations through cryptocurrencies like Ethereum and Bitcoin. The organization says it will be using cryptos to fund open source tech through its newly established UNICEF Cryptocurrency Fund. And the move is part of the UNICEF's ongoing work with blockchain tech, but contributions to the new fund will be held and distributed in the same cryptocurrency. There will be no conversion into fiat currency here. The first contribution is expected to be received from the Ethereum Foundation. It should go to 3 grantees of the UNICEF Innovation Fund. Some listing matters now. The African Export-Import Bank, or the Afrexim Bank as it's more commonly known, is considering listing on the main market segment at the LSE to fund its expanding operations and also take advantage of the opportunities opened up by increasing trade across African countries. Now, the news comes as a rare boost to the UK's anemic IPO market, which is currently suffering from a dearth of new listings, as a possibility of crashing out of the EU without a deal in a matter of weeks hangs over the country's economy and capital markets. The Pan-African Trade Finance Group was set up in 1993. Since then, it's provided over $69 billion of trade financing support in the 51 countries in which it operates. I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll be looking at the Ghanaian stock market. The main index is down by over 10%. It's actually the third worst performing market in the world by some measures. Investors are worried about a couple of things. Next year's elections essentially is the issue here, and the prospect that the government could actually push up inflation as it ramps up spending. Is that exactly what will happen, though? We'll find out at 1800 GMT. In the meantime, though, Beatrice will be back shortly with more news.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's return briefly to South Africa, where a young South African artist is using his love for art to create comics that spread important social messages. Milo Shangela believes it is important to celebrate African heritage and speak to young people through characters they can relate to. CGTN's Julie Shire caught up with him and filed the following report.
South African artist Milo Shangela has steered clear of the norm of creating Marvel and DC-inspired comics. He believes it's time that African creatives reclaimed their own stories.
Well, I'll take the Nelson Mandela stories. You know, these are our stories, but when we find that Hollywood takes it, when it comes back home, it's a completely different product from what we would have imagined the story to be. So there's always something beautiful about your own countrymen actually telling your story.
Milo is proud of his African heritage, and it comes through very strongly in his drawings. He believes it's important to create art that resonates, especially with younger people.
My designs are literally inspired by everyday life. They are inspired by the things that I see at every corner, intersection, or whether I'm traveling home or traveling for a destination holiday. So I always would like to keep it close to home and not go too far from home and come up with fictional things that make it even harder to relate.
The young artist uses his work to bring to life important social conversations. Some of his creations focus on gender-based violence, which is rife in South African society.
We found that in that campaign how people would share their experiences with the art. That's where I actually saw real change and real results and real feelings, I guess. But that is one of the most meaningful works that I've ever done.
There's a growing appreciation for art spurred by the arrival of Comic-Con Africa over the last 2 years, which Milo says has uplifted him as an artist. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Ineos confirms Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge will attempt to run the first sub-2-hour marathon on Saturday in Vienna, Austria.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal,